Hey, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. Hope you all are doing well. Today I have two stories to share with you. They have similar themes where these two couples went camping in a remote area. They both have a bizarre experience which I know you will enjoy. If you have a story you would like to share, then forward your encounter stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying these encounter stories, then hit that like button and subscribe. I truly appreciate all your support. Okay, let's get ready. Go grab your favorite beverage or snack and sit back and relax. Okay, so this first story takes place May of 2014, and it takes place in a northern portion of New Mexico. I've held this story in for the last 6 years, but because it sounds crazy, I got told not to talk about it. I went camping 6 years ago with my now ex-boyfriend of mine. The campsite we picked was beautiful. We were able to drive in through some rough trails. The spot we picked was next to some hiking trails that weren't very far from some natural hot springs and a huge waterfall. We were in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely no one was around. We set up camp next to the car, went hiking, soaked in the hot springs, came back, and had dinner. It was all very normal until we woke up the next day. I need to give you some context as to how we slept that night so you can understand my confusion. Before we went to sleep, I put our food cooler and the stereo that we brought in the car and locked it. I put the keys in the front pocket of my backpack and put the backpack next to my sleeping bag on the far side of the tent, away from the door of the tent. My boyfriend at the time slept nearest to the door of the tent with a gun next to him. We woke up the next morning and I felt fine. I had slept hard, and from inside the tent everything seemed normal. When we got out, our campsite was absolute chaos. The fire pit we had made was ruined. The cooler had been thrown and food was scattered all over the place. The stereo was smashed to pieces laying next to the tree. All of the car doors were open, including the trunk. We stood there for a minute in silence, just taking everything in. The woods felt off now. It was quiet and not the beautiful campsite that I saw yesterday. Everything about those woods felt wrong now. My ex accused me of not locking the car the night before and that an animal got in our stuff. I promised that I had locked it, and I went into the tent to grab the keys from my backpack, but they weren't there. I found them later on the ground right next to the car. We quickly threw everything in the trunk and left. My boyfriend was quiet and wouldn't talk to me about what had just happened. He finally spoke up when we were almost home and told me that he had a dream the night before about something kneeling over him in the tent holding his gun and just staring at him. When I tried to ask him more questions, he got quiet again and said he didn't want to talk about it, and that I shouldn't talk about it anymore either. I've tried to forget about it, but I just can't. Something really wrong happened to us in the woods that night. This was a great story, but I had to ask a question just to be sure if maybe later on down the road she was able to find out what her boyfriend saw, her ex-boyfriend. And she did say that it wasn't so much a Sasquatch. He said a dark-like shadow. So some dark shadow was kneeling over him, holding his gun and staring at him. Absolutely crazy. And he said that it felt like a dream, but then what happened to their belongings and how did the key end up outside if she was so adamant that she had placed a key in her backpack and that backpack was placed in the tent away from the door. Very interesting story. It kind of makes you think twice about going camping in remote areas. Okay, this second story takes place June 28th of 2017 in Trigg County, Kentucky. Okay, so the person states the exact location, but we're not going to go ahead and give that information away, as well as the exact campsite that was used. But let's get right into the story. Well, I made sure we secured the most backcountry spot where you can dump camp. I wanted away from loud people. So it is empty and quiet, covered with plenty of trees. At about 4 a.m., I wake up instantly. I ask my wife, "What's the matter?" She simply whispered she was scared. I asked about what? She said she heard noises out in the woods. Now, normally, I would ask her to go back to sleep and that there's nothing wrong. But this time, suddenly about maybe 5 or 6 owls start hooting. And they're going nonstop, back to back. Then the coyotes begin howling with them. And then every bird wakes up and begins their story. They go on continuously for about 30 seconds. Suddenly, they all stop. And now I know this is completely unusual. Then we hear it. Clump, 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 clump. Branches were breaking, wood was cracking with each step. And I'm like, okay, that's biped. But a human? Unless it was intentionally trying to be frightening, it wouldn't be tromping around. And an adult would know and expect people to have firearms. Also, the terrain would be too difficult to simply decide to go for a stroll in the woods in the middle of the night with no guarantee to meet somebody to scare. During the day, the forest is too dense for hunting. I know there are no bears. I know it's not a deer or any other woodland creature that is common here. So it keeps getting closer and closer. So I cough really loud. No change in its cadence. It sounded like how I would sound walking through the woods, heavy and sweating, full of complaints. These steps were loud. So I get out. The flashlight is in the truck. I go to the truck and rummage around for it. And I'm naked, carrying a knife in my mouth, searching through the vehicle. So I find it. And then I start searching the tree line. I see nothing. But the steps stop. So I start up the vehicle and point it towards the woods. I turn on the high beams. Nothing. I get out. I turn off the lights. I start to head back to the tent. And then suddenly, boom, 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 it runs off. Tree limbs were breaking. Trees were swaying. And I could hear it exhale as it ran. Sounded like a combination of a boar and a man. And so, if you're familiar with the land between the lakes, there's a huge dogman or Bigfoot phenomenon here. Tons of stories on YouTube about it. So I don't know. We both experienced it. It was pretty crazy. I'm very skilled in outdoors activities and I have plenty of experience in backcountry. I am a retired Marine and I have extensive hunting and tracking experience. This was unlike anything I've ever encountered in the bush. Wow, that's another fantastic story. And as promised, we had 2 stories of campers having somewhat the same, but yet different experiences, but they were both bizarre. The first one seemed to be some type of humanoid entity, I don't know, black shadow. It definitely was not a Sasquatch, but the second story would appear to be Sasquatch related, or as this person indicated, it could have been a dogman. He never did physically see the creature that was in front of him. So, again, 2 fantastic stories for today. So now that's going to wrap it up. And I would like to remind you that if you have a story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. Have a fantastic Sunday, and we'll see you all next week.